At exactly 12:03 a.m., a billionaire stood outside a run-down apartment, holding a bag meant for a baby he had never met. But the truth is, he wasn't supposed to be there at all because 6 hours earlier, that same man had been in a glass-walled penthouse, closing a multi-million-dollar deal, when a single, desperate text from a stranger changed everything. And what makes this story impossible to ignore isn't just that she asked for $50. It's that out of all the numbers in the world, she accidentally reached the one man who never answered anyone, let alone strangers begging for help. And yet somehow, he read it, and he didn't look away. 6 hours earlier, Hannah Collins sat on the edge of a worn-out couch in her small apartment on the south side of Columbus, Ohio, her phone dimly lighting up her tired face while her 6-month-old son whimpered softly in a bassinet beside her. The last scoop of baby formula already gone, the container sitting open and empty on the counter like a quiet accusation. And her bank app still showing a balance of $3.17. Not enough for anything that mattered. Not tonight. Not when every store within walking distance had already closed and her car had been out of gas for 2 days, and she had promised herself she wouldn't do this again, wouldn't reach out, wouldn't ask, but promises feel different when your baby hasn't eaten in hours and the silence in the room starts to feel heavier than your pride. So with shaking fingers, she opened her messages and scrolled to a contact she barely knew. A number someone once told her belonged to a local church volunteer, and typed, "Hi, I'm so sorry to bother you this late, but is there any chance I could borrow $50 for baby formula? I can pay you back next week, I promise." And for a long second, she just stared at the screen, her thumb hovering, heart pounding, before finally pressing send, exhaling like she had just crossed a line she couldn't uncross, not realizing that the number she had just texted was off by a single digit, and that one small mistake sent her message far beyond her world, past quiet neighborhoods and dim streetlights, all the way to a private elevator opening into the penthouse office of Ethan Hayes, a 39-year-old billionaire known for ignoring everything that didn't serve his time, a man surrounded by screens, contracts, and people who waited for his approval. And yet in the middle of a conversation about numbers most people couldn't even imagine, his phone buzzed once. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he glanced down, read the message, and didn't hand the phone off, didn't silence it, didn't dismiss it like he did with everything else. Instead, he read it again, slower this time, as if trying to understand why a stranger's quiet desperation felt louder than the room he was standing in. And as the voices around him continued talking, he stopped listening because something about those words, simple, unpolished, real, cut through everything else. And without realizing it yet, Ethan Hayes had just stepped into a story that was about to change both their lives before the night was over. The room around Ethan Hayes did not change, but something inside him did. Because while the conversation about projections and acquisition timelines continued, his attention stayed locked on a message that should have meant nothing, and yet refused to be ignored. And for a brief moment, he considered the simplest explanation that it was a scam, a wrong number, or just another story designed to pull money from people who had too much of it. But there was something about the wording that felt unpolished in a way that could not be faked easily. No dramatic phrasing, no long explanation, just a quiet request and a promise to pay it back. And without announcing anything, he raised his hand slightly, signaling the room to pause, the kind of gesture that immediately silenced everyone without question. And as the last voice faded, he looked down at his phone again and typed, "I think you have the wrong number," then hesitated for half a second before adding, "But why do you need it? Tonight?" And when he pressed send, he did not understand why he was waiting for a reply, but he did. While across the city, Hannah stared at her phone the moment it buzzed, her breath catching as she read the response, confusion washing over her, because the tone did not sound like the person she meant to contact. And for a second, she thought about not replying at all, about pretending she never sent anything. But then her baby let out a small, tired cry that cut through her. Hesitation, and she typed back, slower this time, "I'm so sorry. I might have the wrong number. My baby has not eaten, and I ran out of formula. I just need enough to get through the night." And after she sent it, she closed her eyes briefly, as if bracing for silence or rejection. But instead, 3 dots appeared almost immediately, and that alone made her sit up straighter. Because people did not usually respond that fast to strangers, especially not at this hour, and Ethan read her message. The second it came through, his jaw tightening slightly as he leaned back in his chair, the city lights stretching endlessly behind him through the glass walls. And for the first time that night, the numbers on the screens in front of him felt distant and irrelevant, because this was not a negotiation or a strategy. This was a decision with no clear return, no measurable outcome. Just a choice to either close the message and move on or step into something unpredictable and without fully thinking it through. He typed, "Send me your address," then paused again, aware of how that might sound, before adding, "I can help." And when he sent it, the room remained silent, his team watching him carefully, unsure what had just shifted, while miles away, Hannah's heart started pounding so loudly she could hear it, her eyes fixed on the screen as doubt and hope collided at the same time, because nothing about this felt normal. And yet she could not ignore the possibility that this might be the only chance she had. And as seconds passed that felt longer than minutes, she realized that whatever happened next would change the course of this night in a way she could not take back. Hannah stared at the message asking for her address, her fingers frozen above the screen as a wave of caution rushed through her, because every warning she had ever heard about strangers echoed in her mind at once. And yet so did the sound of her baby shifting restlessly beside her, small, fragile, and depending entirely on her to make the right decision. And for a moment she stood up and walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to glance at the quiet street below, as if the answer might somehow be waiting out there in the stillness of parked cars and dim streetlights. But there was nothing, just the same empty night she had been facing for hours. And when she looked back at her phone, the message was still there, simple and direct, offering help without explanation, and that was what made it feel both real and dangerous at the same time, because people who wanted something usually explained themselves, but this man had not asked for anything in return, and that uncertainty made her hesitate longer than she expected. While across the city, Ethan Hayes stood up from his chair without saying a word, adjusting the sleeve of his tailored jacket as his team watched in quiet confusion. One of them starting to speak before stopping mid-sentence when Ethan picked up his keys, because when he made a decision like this, there was no discussion, no need for approval, and yet even he could not fully explain why he was doing it. Why, out of everything competing for his attention, this single message had taken priority, but something about it felt unfinished, like a moment that would stay with him if he ignored it. And he had learned a long time ago that the things that stayed were rarely insignificant. And as he stepped into the private elevator, the doors closing with a soft sound that sealed his decision, his phone remained in his hand, his eyes returning to the empty chat as he waited, not impatiently, but with a quiet focus that was unusual even for him. And back in the apartment, Hannah finally sat down. Again, her shoulders dropping slightly as if the weight of the choice had settled. And she whispered softly to her baby, more to steady herself than anything else, before picking up the phone and typing slowly, double-checking every letter this time. "I do not know who you are, but if you are serious, this is my address." And when she hit send, she felt something shift inside her, a mixture of relief and fear blending into something she could not name, because she had just trusted a stranger with the most personal piece of information she had. And there was no way to take it back now. And almost immediately, the message showed as delivered, then read, and for a few seconds, nothing happened, no reply, no confirmation, just silence, and that silence stretched just long enough